you're watching live, checking us out on YouTube, or listening on your favorite podcast provider, you are most definitely my people. Welcome to another episode of Botched Spots and Chair Shots. I am your host, a chef by trade and a mark by choice. I am the Will Gray, and joining me tonight is the former ICW World Champion. He's been from IWA Mid-South to GCW to CCW. If they get hardcore, this man's probably been there at one point or another. He is the Wizard King, Orin Veidt. Orin, welcome back, man, and how's the opening week for the Astros, brother?
I don't want to talk about it yet.
Yeah, just not there? Just not that point of the season yet?
We're not an April team. It's okay.
I found it as a Red Sox fan. We live in the world of like bookend seasons. Like the beginning and the end are always terrible. It's that middle point that makes me have hope for the baseball season. Joining us also directly below me on your screen, he's one of the hosts of the On the Forklift Podcast. He was with me last night on WCW. He's back here tonight 2 times in one weekend. It's a regular occurrence now. He's here tonight to get hardcore. He's Ethan on a forklift. Ethan, how are you, brother?
Absolutely fantastic. I'd say I'm doing a little bit better than Orin. I'm a Tigers fan, so we took a couple, but then we've been absolutely beaten and battered by your Red Sox there. So I'm somewhere in the middle, I guess.
I've seen some weird stuff happening in baseball, and I think maybe between the three of us, we could fill the hour with just that if we really wanted to.
Yes, we really could.
But perched upon her iron throne in the boss bitch's corner, she is the Beyonce to my Hova, she is Bonnie to my Clyde, she is the brains behind everything Rivet City Radio and Botch Spots and Chair Shots. She is Miss Allison. Al, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited for you to eat this pizza.
There it goes. Thursday night, the crowd spoke. We delivered. I said if you guys bought me dinner tonight, I would eat pizza live on air. So while we transition over and we go into Pissed Off for Greatness, I'm going to indulge myself in a little pan pineapple pizza. We got a pan pizza with some pineapples and pepperonis because that's what you degenerates said I was going to have for dinner tonight. So I'm going to indulge myself. Orin, Ethan, I'm going to let you guys tee off. I'll start with Orin, then we'll go into Ethan. Always start, what has you pissed off for greatness? This could be what has you worked up in pro wrestling, good, bad, or indifferent.
Oh, God. I mean, there's probably something for each one of those, good, bad, and indifferent. But I would just go off of, let's go bad, and let's go the Raw after Mania, and just the overwhelming disappointment that was, with everything that led up to a very good Mania and a very exciting time for that, being there live for the SmackDown and being, just in that sea of people during that whole time and seeing the Hall of Fame and stuff and getting really excited about wrestling. So then, you have that classic Raw after Mania where nothing happens. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, this was supposed to be the most exciting weekly show of the year. What the hell? Now this is awful. And yeah, it's a real bummer. And it makes you really frustrated because you think things are going to be better again, like they were for me in the Ruthless Aggression era. But maybe we have to wait a little bit longer for that.
I'm an Attitude Era kid. I was a teenager around the time that started to kick off. So I feel that because I feel kind of spoiled because it was Attitude Era backing into Ruthless Aggression. So as wrestling fans, especially young wrestling fans coming into our young adulthood, like we were really spoiled with the product that was getting put out there. So looking at it today, I definitely feel that. I feel like that Raw after Mania has lost some of that lore and lust. You know what I mean? Where it was a real big deal, and now it's still a big deal, just maybe not as big as before.
I think it's a big deal now because we tell ourselves it's a big deal. And, and the more I think about it, the more it's true that the last exciting Raw after Mania was the Ziggler cash-in, and that was 10 years ago. And we still believe that this is, the biggest Raw of the year, but we haven't gotten anything the last 10 years. But next year we'll say the same thing and be like, oh, it's the Raw after Mania. It's going to be great. Then we hope for better times.
We all drink the Kool-Aid.
Oh yeah.
All right, Ethan, what has you pissed off for greatness, brother?
I could piggyback on that. I have one consistent thing that always pisses me off. So it doesn't matter what site it is, you run across these Facebook groups that always relay information, and they'll post things, and they'll use the tagline WWE legend, and it's always Vince Russo. It's like, stop calling him.
Oh
legend.
God.
He's not a legend. If you want to say, like, the acceptable one would be veteran. I'm fine with that. If you want to say veteran, cool. I would say like Outcast would work as well.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
I'm just like, guys, you got to stop doing that. I do have to piggyback the Raw After Mania thing. We build it up in our heads, but it's not just us building it up in our heads. So their marketing team has also posted things. What's going to happen on the Raw After Mania? # Raw After Mania. Everything to get something trending, and then we get nothing. We didn't even get a Braun Breaker call-up, which is disappointing. Which I'm like, if he wins the belt in NXT, or if he loses it, bring him up. I think he should have won the belt, kept him down there, and brought the better one up, which is Carmelo Hayes. But it's neither here nor there. On the positive side, something that pissing me off has led into me just kind of reevaluating the indie wrestling scene right now. And performance-wise, it is at its absolute peak right now, and I think that's awesome. So I've heard people say, "Oh, I think it's in a slump," and I'm like, respectfully disagree.
Yeah, didn't we just have the entire Twitter discourse about how the indies are dead, or something along those lines, where there was like 5 people that said that they were dead, and then everybody else was like, no, they're not. They're great. Look at all these crowds.
Did you read my interaction with Drew Cordero?
I feel like the people who are saying the indies are dead, and I know both of you can attest for this because, Ethan, I know how much coverage you have, and Orin, I know what you do for a living. For the guys that are active in indies, be it either as a fan, a journalist, or a worker, you see the amount of indie shows that are happening out there. There's no way anybody in their right mind can say the indies are dead when you can literally go to any town and, pretty much on the East Coast, all the way down the South, Pacific Northwest, all the way down through California. If you go through any of those major markets, Detroit, the Midwest, Texas, they're all chocked full of indie promotions. They may not all be big and bad. They're not all Limitless or Beyond or Wrestling Open or Prestige or some of the guys we're going to talk about tonight that go a little bit more hardcore, but there's still quality work getting done out there. So I think the whole idea that the indies are dead, that's fake news. Fake news.
Yes.
Al, before I go and critique this pizza, do you have anything that has you pissed off?
I don't really have anything that has me pissed off, but I do have something that I find mildly comical.
What's that?
That AEW thinks that they're going to fill Wembley Stadium in a market where they do not run their weekly show or any of their pay-per-views. I don't understand why Tony Khan thinks that this is a good idea. You have literally no fans there.
I don't think no fans is a good way.
They have a very small fan base there because they can't, it would take a lot for somebody to be able to watch Dynamite over there.
They don't run live. They run Dynamite on Fridays over there.
Interesting.
So it's I think Dynamite, and I can ask Haley. Haley's the British connection right now. We also know Shady. Shout out to Shady Nattrace, a great independent wrestler in the UK. I'll ask them both to kind of get what their live schedule is like, because they're 6 hours ahead of us on Central Time. So it's currently right now almost 5 o'clock in the morning there.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what their live schedule is like, if they get a lot of live stuff, or if it's all pre-taped and, post-taped showings later, if Raw's on Tuesday over there, or whatever the case is.
Because I think Haley said it is.
Yeah.
You can watch it live on the network, I think, but it's at 5 in the morning.
So if you want to watch it live, you have to, be up at... It's like watching Wrestle Kingdom for people on the East Coast. You got to get up at 2 a.m. to watch Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know. Wembley is 90,000 seats. Even if you take out a third for production stuff, that's still a lot of seats.
60K is a big stadium. That's a lot to fill.
And that's more than they have even filled, they have filled, period. What did we say their highest pay-per-view was like 16,000.
Yeah, you round it up, call it 17.5 for their biggest sellout in an arena. And I don't necessarily think that they can't sell 60K, because when you take the whole European market, that'll be a totally different, like, animal in itself, because there's lots of indie fans in Europe. So looking at just the finite, like, picture of the UK market, I think is a little bit iffy. You're right. I don't think there's 90,000 UK fans that are going to go there, but there might be 90,000 people in Europe that want to see it.
Maybe.
Well,
I think the big selling point for this is that Kenny Omega is going to be a headline attraction at this, and Will Ospreay is going to be involved somehow.
you have to have Will Ospreay, because if you do not have Will Ospreay, you cannot draw that amount of people, because he is your region's face. He is the guy that best represents your region in terms of wrestling production. And outside of that, they have Tony Storm and I guess Saraya, and I don't think that would sell out an arena. And I think that's really what they're up against, is a massive lack of, European based talent that they can just watch it at home. They don't have to pay an absurd amount of money to see somebody that isn't representing them on their biggest stage. It seems lofty.
All right. Well, I'm going to give my rating and probably change my pissed off for greatness. I've got this whole Flair Rhea Ripley thing I'm going to get into in a second, but I'll talk pizza first. I'm going to be honest, just right off the rip, Orin, you nailed it before we got on air. Like, the first slice, I was kind of like, okay, this isn't for me, it's too sweet. Okay, but I ate that second slice, there was something fucking there. Like, the saltiness of the pepperoni, like, the cheese and the richness of the dairy, and then that weird fucking, like, that little hint of sweetness from the pineapples. But what was cooler to me was the texture, because it's a totally different texture than anything on pizza I've ever tried. It's cool in a weird way, if that's a weird way to talk about food. Like, the way it was good. It might not be something I order every time I eat a pizza, but I'm not opposed to pineapple pizza, I guess. Fuck it, I'll flip.
Vindication!
I'll flip. My pissed off for greatness, though, is kind of playing off a little bit of what everyone said except for Al, because it has nothing to do with AEW.
Well, I wanted to do something different.
Flair Rhea getting overshadowed by the Bloodline story, and not in a bad way. I understand the Bloodline's huge. It's the biggest story they've had in the past 25 years. All of that. Give them their roses. To me, this is very reminiscent of Steamboat Savage. Neither of the matches main evented a WrestleMania that looked at right now, night one of this year's, gotten blown out of proportion, especially with the backlash from night two and the Raw after Mania. You know what I mean? Night one has been put on this pedestal. So neither Steamboat Savage or Rhea and them main evented. Both were for major titles with major build-ups and stories. The timing, the execution, the selling, the facials, the crowd, ref Jessica Carr's role in the match between the two of them. That night, it may have been the best worked match, in my opinion, on the card. The main event match, the story, and the match itself made it bigger because of what it was. But when it came to just pure Raw wrestling, I feel like Flair and Rhea were the best match of the night. Same as Steamboat Savage at WrestleMania 3. I hate that their match is getting so overshadowed by everything happening with the Bloodline, because it was genuinely a great banger of a match, and I worry that right now this might be one of those, it's going to take a couple years and then people are going to look back at it and go, oh fuck, you remember when Rhea and they went 30 minutes at WrestleMania? So yeah, pineapple and pizza is not so bad. This is the part, we've got a couple news and rumors we want to touch on. So Al, I guess I'm going to send it up to you now. Let's knock a couple of those out before we dive into the meat and potatoes of it.
Okay. I'm going to save the WWE sale for last.
Yeah.
Jay White debuts in AEW, officially under contract, answering questions of where he was going to land post New Japan.
Either of you can tee off. I'll always go last here. So
I don't think it's a newsworthy signing at all. I don't think it's a signing that moves the radar. I don't think that he is somebody like as somebody who was huge into New Japan and whose favorite wrestler is Zack Sabre Jr. Like I can't look at Jay White and be like, this is a guy that's going to change a promotion. This is a guy that's going to move the radar. And I think if he would have debuted on WWE just in the Raw after Mania, like there was so much anticipation for, I don't think they would have done something with him, but it would have fizzled out and he would have been stuck in the doldrums of everybody else that's jumped over. And I think it'll honestly be the same thing in AEW. I don't think anything changes. I think he comes over and gets stuck as a Swerve Strickland type of guy where you come over with star power, but there's no spot at the table because there's so many other guys that are there that aren't going anywhere. And I think you just kind of get stuck. But that's also my opinion on Jay White, when I know there's a lot of people that think he's amazing wrestler and he was the leader of the Bullet Club for a reason.
Ethan, what you think about Jay?
It's a guy that you can never touch on, or you never really. I mean, his in-ring work is really good. It's a very Japan style, so it's going to take a minute for him to get used to wrestling in American TV style. And for those that are, for the lack of a better term, sycophants, like myself, it's cool. It's really fun. But as Orin said, it's not a needle mover in regards to, hey, this is a huge star power thing. I know that the rumor had been there was a big push for him to go to WWE, and it really just more along the lines felt of just a pooling of talent, like they've been known to do in the past. It's just, we got to have him. We don't know what to do with him, but we got to have him. And there's really only been one guy that at WWE that's broken out of that shell recently, and that's JD Drake, or it's LA Knight. Like, he's the only one that Eli Drake's the only one that's broken out of that mold. And to that point, you're like, okay, so Jay White's going to go there and he's going to get stuck in a feud with somebody and do nothing. I think it's the same thing with AEW, though. He's going to go there, get stuck in a feud with somebody, and it's going to do nothing. You said Swerve. I'll say Keith Lee. There's multiple guys out there. I mean, when the biggest thing that Swerve has done of note is he is lost the title to Nick Wayne last night. Like, that's really cool because Defy is really fun to watch, but it's not a needle mover on a national stage at all. So it's cool if you're going to do something. I guess it keeps the relationship alive with like New Japan and stuff like that. But if you stick by him, loser, can't wrestle in New Japan anymore, then what's that matter too?
JJ in the chat said that. She said, remember that their AEW allows their talent to work with outside independent promotions and the people they partner with. So it'll be your New Japans and your CMLLs and your AAAs. But they also have the other indie promotions they send their guys out to. So Jay White will get that in national exposure. I do agree the Eli Drake LA Knight thing. I feel like he's the perfect example of a guy who came in, got put through the machine, went through the WWE identity crisis, and still was able to come out. Instead of Eli Drake, he's LA Knight, but ultimately it's the exact same person with a different name. So he was one of the few people that really executed that identity crisis a lot, because you've seen people come in and come out, and Finn Balor's a perfect example. He's kind of a very watered down version of what Prince Devitt was in New Japan. But I agree with pretty much everything you guys said there with that. He's as a New Japan fan, I was hyped to see him come over, but I also don't think that the hardcore, anything beyond the hardcore American fans are really going to know a lot about who Jay White is. They're not watching New Japan Pro Wrestling or New Japan Strong the way they watch AEW and stuff. So his one or two one-off appearances in Forbidden Door and on Dynamite, they'll be great because people will go, I remember that guy. But it's not the same as if, like, one of the big guys bouncing back and forth. It's not a Cody coming back to WWE. It's not a,
It's not a Nash Hall thing.
Yeah, it's not a Daniel Bryan going to AEW. It's not a Punk going to AEW.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I can pretty much agree with that. What you got next, Tony?
Okada drops the IWGP belt to Sonata. Aussie Open wins IWGP tag titles. Has New Japan gained any steam in the States?
Shout out Sonata. all it took was him shaving that beard, and then he just wins the title. So that's all it took. He was a guy that instantly impressed me the second he left, Impact and went back from Excursion and stuff, and he instantly changed up everything and it became a main event level guy, but never was up there. And now he is beating one of the most unbeatable guys. And then one of my biggest takeaways from Mania weekend was we went to like the Super Show, me and one of my buddies, and he had never seen Aussie Open wrestle, and he goes, "How are these guys not signed to a major company? Like how did Aussie Open not get picked up by WWE? They are so perfect for them. They're big guys that can move great, that can do all these things." And I said, well, they wouldn't do anything because WWE wouldn't do anything with them, but they're amazing to watch wrestle, and they are a great tag team. And I thought that was awesome to see too, because I think they're beyond underrated.
I had them on my list last year as like one of the top rated tag teams. It was the usual suspects with your Briscoes and your FTRs and your Usos and stuff like that. But Aussie Open was moving up that list. Ethan, you have a fan from your show in the chat for you. Yeah, Ethan's a fucking idiot.
That's PK. That's my co-host.
It's good to know that you guys do the same things, because I will show up in other shows intentionally to heckle my friends. So it's good to know that other people do that too. That makes me feel
sorry.
better.
As I called him earlier, and he doesn't like this, but because Horror Slam's the only deathmatch promotion that runs in Michigan, the voice of Michigan deathmatch wrestling, Clinton Davis. So that's, if anybody wants to rib him for it and just make him float out of a doorway because of his ego, it'll be kind of fun.
Next, Bailey says at some point all romantic love stories come to an end. WWE says everything is fine. Asuka says spoiled American fans will miss her when she's back in Japan. Again, WWE says everything is fine.
Do you guys think there's anything to these pissed off wrestlers, or are they just kind of working up fans to get views and clicks?
It's clickbait. I don't think, like, if Asuka would have left, I think she would have left a long time ago. I think she's one of the best wrestlers in the world, and is always must watch TV. And I think if she was going to leave, she would have done it a long time ago. And I think Bailey could leave, but I don't think so. I think she sees what Sasha's doing in New Japan and might want to go do something different. But I think when you've been on the biggest stage and you're doing what she's doing, like I don't think she's going anywhere either.
Ethan, what do you think about Bailey and Asuka putting out some fires on Twitter?
So Asuka, I think it's just part of her character development right now. I think it's part of the Kana character. She's always been very I wouldn't say lovey-dovey, but she's always been very in touch with the fans. So to see that change in it, I don't think that's a personal change. I think that's just a character change. And Bailey is a troll. Like, Bailey is a troll. Like, she's right around the same. I know she's a millennial. She's right around the same age as me. Grew up in the world of like trolling people on all kinds of stuff. It's what she does. She's done it for years. She used to post, like, when she would be out on injury for certain things, she'd post pictures of like locations in the city that the show was in. That's her character. I think maybe we start to see a reversion to face Bailey because it's been about 5 years, but I don't see her leaving in regards to that.
Has it been 5 years since she took down the Bailey Buddies?
Feels like it.
We can find out.
I mean, she's been written out of creative currently.
She's listed as available for use, but she hasn't been on any run sheets that have been sent out or anything right now. So she's listed as available, but she's not currently booked on the shows, is how she's listed internally.
I mean, these things combined with like the things that Rhonda had to say about like how terrible WWE books their women, which, I mean, I don't super care for Rhonda, but she's not wrong. You know, like all of these pieces from all of these women saying things. Alexa has said things recently, like that people keep thinking that she's on a hiatus. She's like, no, I'm not on a hiatus. They know where to find me. Like, there have been several women in that locker room that have tweeted things about not being happy. So, I mean, they may be trolling and it may be true. It's hard to really tell because I know, you know, combined with all of the other women saying things like that women's locker room's not happy.
That's also one of those things where it's like, before we got on air, Orin and I were kind of chatting about a different promotion off the record kind of stuff, and we were kind of talking about how there's kind of 50-50 splits a lot of times when you talk to people in locker rooms. Sometimes they're like, man, I absolutely love person A, and then you'll talk to somebody from the same show that's like, fuck that dude. You know what I mean? Like, it's so weird how it's not specific to wrestling, and I saw it a lot as a chef. When I was, as an executive chef, there were lots of times I used that same analogy about me. I'd be like, people either love me or they absolutely hate my guts, and there's absolutely no in between there. And I feel like that is a lot of time there's people like that in wrestling, especially with the fandom. Fans will be really hardcore about it. They will love somebody, and then they will flip on them in a heartbeat, and it'll become their worst enemy. We saw it happen to Cody in AEW. We've seen it happen to a couple guys in WWE since they've been called back up. We see it with Wyatt right now. Wyatt's kind of got that pendulum where it seems like it's swinging. One day the fans are super behind him, and then the next day they're like, we want you back. Where the fuck are you? You know what I mean? The wrestling fans are fickle as shit. Like, just call a spade a spade.
Yeah. My last thing is, of course, the biggest thing of them all.
Uh-oh, where did...
He froze.
Oh, okay. Just go ahead and keep reading, and we'll keep rolling. I'll get back
Endeavor Group buys WWE, the investment group as WWE, to an already stacked roster of assets, including the UFC and PBR.
The Professional Bull Riders Association.
The most dangerous one of both of all of those companies. That's one that I think it was just a matter of time. And I think it's interesting to see the change of Vince and what he's doing, and seeing where that's going to go and what's happening with that. But I think everybody's happy because now they're like, okay, we don't have to worry about that anymore. That's done. It went somewhere, and now they're brothers with the UFC. So I think that changes a lot. I know a lot of people were talking about, what that looks like in terms of having like in-house agents that work for the UFC and that do all the deals with the UFC and UFC fighters. So. Are they going to play any part in working with WWE wrestlers and, helping work their deals out and do things like that and see how that's going to change the landscape of stuff? Because I think that would be the biggest impact is if that internal agent group kind of starts changing wrestler contracts or makes them a little bit different.
I think the contract negotiations are going to be a huge factor moving forward, and especially for that reason. UFC has had a historical, I don't even know, I guess infamous might be a better way to look at it, is an infamous run with how they've paid their talent. Dana White's got a lot of heat from his own fighters after they've left UFC to be like, I made more in one fight, boxing somebody on Drunk Celebrity Boxing 12 than I made in 3 fights in the UFC. You know what I mean? Like, people see this stuff. So I feel like now having they use the bigger brush stroke of sports entertainment. And when they say that and they lump it in with things, the UFC and the Professional Bull Riders Association and everything that goes to it, They try to hush it. They're trying to tell us, calm down, nothing's going to change, WWE's going to stay WWE, UFC's going to stay UFC. But they're setting on ultimately $22 billion worth of assets. I don't feel like there's any way we won't see, even if it's small, menial crossovers, I don't see there's any way where we don't get crossover between those two. and not necessarily UFC fighters in the ring or vice versa, WWE guys in the octagon. I just feel like there's money to be made by having Roman Reigns set ringside or vice versa. Izzy just won his match, the big KO everybody was looking for. Now you get him ringside in WWE, and it puts eyes on both products for Endeavor or vice versa. So I think we all knew the sell was happening when Vince came back in January. It was just a matter of when. I'm not sure anybody expected it to happen less than 90 days after he came back, though.
I don't think there's any way we don't have John Jones wrestle for the Universal title. I think that is something that he is such a megastar in UFC, and we've seen WWE do it before with boxers that, hell, they have Logan Paul doing what he's doing right now. Like, there's no way they don't do that at like a Saudi show where they have John Jones versus Roman Reigns in some sort of match, because it's just too much money that they see on the table that they aren't going to leave.
This relationship is the perfect relationship for the kind of the bot shows that happen in like Saudi Arabia and stuff, where it's going to be just as big cash draws as they can get on that market specifically. Yep. And I think this kind of a crossover and the ability to have two of the biggest branded franchises in sports, period, not just sports entertainment, but sports. UFC and WWE are world known. A team wins the World Series. What belt do you see on their parade? They win a Super Bowl. What do you see on the parade? Now, UFC and WWE are synonymous because they're both under that Endeavor umbrella. It's only a matter of time before we start seeing it happen, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
1,000%. Was that it, Al?
Yeah. I'm curious as to like what they're going to do with, because Matt Riddle is banned from working with UFC, and there's somebody else too, isn't there?
Matt Riddle got popped because of the drug test. That was before they stopped testing for weed. That's what he kept popping for, was weed, and they kicked him out for that.
Right.
Then you look at somebody like a Bobby Lashley, who, if he goes back to MMA, is under. He's with Bellator. His MMA contract is through Bellator. So if he leaves WWE to do MMA fights, they have to be with Bellator MMA. So that leaves the question: Bobby Lashley can't technically do crossovers because of the smaller inner workings of the webs. And I know by no means am trying to claim that I understand underwriting at all. But like, these are the questions now when you think that a bigger umbrella that owns multiple properties, how it's going to affect these other guys' contracts now. Ethan is back.
Yeah, I don't know. Everything went black. My computer completely shut down. I actually took it off of my docking station, so I'm working just purely off the laptop now.
We'll let you jump right in, man. No worries. Going through the chat real quick. What's up, Katie? What's up, Just? Thanks for everybody stopping in. Ethan, we were talking about Endeavor. Orin and I both kind of chimed in about what we thought about the Endeavor buying WWE, what it looks like under the umbrella now with UFC, PBR, the Miss Universe organization, and all the assets that Endeavor owns. Now they own the largest wrestling promotion in the world.
Wait, they own Miss Universe?
They own the Miss Universe organization.
That's interesting.
They bought it from Donald Trump in 2016, oddly enough.
I wonder why. Not getting into any political speculations. Anyway, I think it'll be good and it'll be bad. So here's the thing: Endeavor's still trying to get all of their money back from the UFC purchase. That still really hasn't happened. However, the UFC does not do merchandising well. What does the WWE do the best?
Merchandise.
That is the number one thing that they do, and that's the number one thing they make money on is merchandise. So I think you're going to see a little bit of crossover come in the fact, and I think we all probably should have seen this coming when they kind of retired the WWE shop and started moving everything through Fanatics.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what's going to happen is UFC is going to get better merchandising, which is what needs to happen, truthfully. They are failure to capitalize on that so bad. The last thing that they really pushed hard was Tap Out and Affliction, which, oddly enough, WWE owns the Tap Out brand as well. So I think it's good. the other thing that it does is it puts oversight on WWE, which kind of harkens back to the last thing that we were talking about with the women. I don't really, I'm not here to hijack a show and talk about Vince's accusations, things like that against him. But if the locker room is feeling uncomfortable, now there is somebody to remove him from a place and keep him off. He's no longer the majority owner, so there's not a way to muscle your way back into the room. I do think the oversight's going to be a good thing. Ari's not going to step in a hell of a lot, though, as has been shown with UFC already. But yeah, and the other thing is there's so much crossover between these functions anyway. There's always somebody. Liv Morgan is constantly ringside or on the side of the octagon. There's always people. Cain Velasquez was showing up on that. You've got guys like, I think the biggest crossover that you're going to see is more so in the boxing world with guys like Tyson Fury and UFC now. You've got so much star power at your disposal. The name of the game is advertising, and that's what this whole thing's going to break down to, is how many people can they show on screen at certain times to get somebody else to watch something.
Yeah.
Agreed. Just from the Get Show podcast says UFC is going to get the Legends 4-pack by Mattel. UFC Barbie coming by Mattel next fall.
It'll be Ronda because, they love her. They just inducted her into their Hall of Fame. So I think they'll probably push for a lot more Ronda.
I hope it's a 2-pack of Holly Holmes just beating the shit out of Ronda Rousey.
The first Mattel 2-pack will be Ronda Rousey and, Holmes.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's kind of dive into the meat and potatoes here. When I reached out to both of you, the idea was everything was kind of happening, and I'm just going to generalize it and say that with XPW. Some eyes were put on Deathmatch Wrestling. Once again, I use this a lot, good, bad, and indifferent. Some people didn't care. Some people thought it was the best shit they've seen in years, and some people were like, holy crap, I can't believe they let that happen. Neither here nor there how we feel about it. This conversation as a whole, I wanted it to be kind of a discussion on the current state of deathmatch and hardcore wrestling. We're going to kind of look at it in sections. I want to start right now by kind of looking at the big picture. Both of you have very hands-on approaches. Orin being in the ring, working full-time. Ethan with your broadcasting, with your podcast, working with the guys you work with. When you see deathmatch wrestling and the exposure it's getting on the mainstream right now via your AEWs with their Texas death matches, or Nick Gage coming in, and your Moxleys, what do you guys think as people who are, in the trenches with some deathmatch wrestling regularly, when you see it kind of go to that level? What was your, when you first saw Nick Gage versus Chris Jericho, I guess? What did you guys think about it getting put out there on that mainstream on a live Wednesday night AEW Dynamite, I guess is a good way to put it. And I'll, this is kind of a free form. I'm just going to open it up to both of you so you guys can kind of dive in as you want to go.
I think it's great and terrible at the same time. I think that the exposure and getting eyes on the genre is something that is desperately needed, and something that a lot of us have worked for so long and worked so hard to get those eyes. But at the same time, it opens up that world to a lot of people to say, oh, I could just do that and I can get a lot of fast cash, I guess, and get notoriety and come into this market and not have to do anything. And it's frustrating, and I feel like a gatekeeper because of it, and it might be because of the way I was brought into it, where I had to earn the respect of my peers, and I had to show that I was willing to genuinely give my entire body to this because I loved it, because I grew up loving it, because this was always what I wanted to do. And now you have guys that, oh, well, it's popular, it's hot right now. It is on TV. It is talked about regularly. It's not as taboo as it once was. And now everybody and their grandmother will do it. And it makes it tougher for guys like myself to be taken seriously, because you get sent the video of a dude getting a syringe put through his member a million times, like, oh my god, you see, this is so funny. And I'm like, yeah, cool, great. Like, that's I really want to keep getting sent that video, because
after you've seen it that one time, you're kind of like, all right guys, I'm good now.
Yeah. And like, to each their own. Like, XPW has a platform where, and Schlack said it best, like, it's owned by a guy who owns a porn company. What did you expect? Like, it was bound to happen at some point. And, you know, it got shock value, and it got people to talk about it, which is all that matters anymore. It doesn't have to be good for people to talk about it, as long as people are talking about it. So it's great that people are talking about it, but it opens the door for a lot of people that have no business doing it to be talked about.
I agree with it. The way I look at it, so deathmatch wrestling is a lot like a drug. But specifically, okay, I shouldn't say a drug. It's a lot like weed. So back in the day, you used to, you know, you'd have to go down to, you go to an apartment building and you'd buy a baggie from a dude. And now everybody has it accessible. Everybody's grandma can smoke weed if they want, depending on what state you live in, wherever you're at. And it's one of those. So it used to be kind of taboo. You used to have to trade tapes of it with your buddies. Like, hey, man, I got this from some guy in Seattle, and this is what's going on that way, or, you know, Rochester, New York, whatever it is. Now wrestling's so accessible. And then I've talked about this before with when people come and they look at numbers and they go, well, wrestling's not as popular as it used to be. And I said, no, it's not that. There's more options now. So back in the day, you had cable TV. That was it. You had to watch something. That's why the numbers were 2 million. Now, you know, you're getting 1.5 million views, but there's 400 times the amount of avenues of stuff to watch that time. The streaming services, everything, and somebody's still tuning in to that. And those are Nielsen numbers, by the way, not just streaming numbers. That is how I view deathmatch wrestling. However, that spot is one of those things. And right, like Schlack said, it's just, Rob owns a porn company. Like, what did you expect to happen? My thing is, and this is where my beef comes with it, somebody is going to see that, and not somebody who's good, not somebody who's ingenuitive, not somebody who's this, but they're going to see it and they're going to go, I have to get my 15 minutes. I have to do something to one up that. And what it does is it makes the guys who are really like Orin, like yourself, it makes people like that who are doing the business the right way, even though it looks dangerous, you're doing it the right way. It puts you guys in a weird spot, because now you're looked upon by the guy who's trying to one up the hypodermic into the eggplant bit. Like, that's not, and it's not fair to you, and it's also not fair to, like, so me as a broadcaster, now I have to go, okay, who's going to whip their junk out on a stream, and I'm going to have to pull my thing down. So, and I've told the owners of the promotion, if that happens, I said, I'm packing my stuff up and I'm leaving. I can't, I'm not going to get knocked on YouTube because I do stuff outside of that. We do family friendly shows as well, and it's the same platform. So I'm like, please just tell your guys, please don't do that. Like, butt cheeks are one thing that's happened for years. McMahon used to have people kiss his ass on TV. But so I think what it does is it does cause people to be creative. And it did what it wanted to do, which was talk about things. That was the biggest thing, because that was all Twitter was for 3 days.
Oh my God!
They weren't talking about the actual really good matches on that card. They were talking about that.
Ironically enough, shout out to my boy Matt from Smackin' It Raw, the #1 wrestling podcast on Pornhub. He says he views death matches as kind of like gangbang porn. It's not for everybody, but if you love it, it's there for you. Go find it. Find what you like and love. And, you know, he jokingly used that analogy. Like, with wrestling, you know, people have used dancing. Matt used porn in his analogy. But it's like, people can tango, people can cha-cha, people can do whatever. You know, in wrestling, you've got luchador and traditional and catch-as-catch-can and deathmatch wrestling. You know what I mean? Like, there's different subgenres of the sport. And I think that's the perfect analogy. Somebody like IWTV, like, it's a buffet of indie wrestling. You can watch good traditional wrestling, Southern wrestling. You can watch British strong style, Japanese strong style, or deathmatch wrestling, and it's just like flipping through the top 10 on your Netflix. Al, as a wrestling fan who didn't get into hardcore wrestling initially, you came into it as like a WWE mainstream wrestling fan. You've kind of branched into the indies and stuff. The longer you've watched wrestling, you did it like in the funnel. Your funnel opened up. You started with a little hole that was your WWE's, and then the more wrestling you watch, like the water hose busted open. You love a good, car crash match. Table spots, ladder matches. You like hardcore wrestling. What was your initial thoughts when you saw somebody like Nick Gage for the first time?
With Nick Gage, to me, like, the pizza cutter was like, oh, this is happening on, like, regular TV? Okay. Like, at first I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but, like, it kind of grows on you. I don't mind seeing a guy hit with a light tube. It's kind of cool looking. Like, I don't know. I just think it's different. Do I want to only watch deathmatch wrestling? No. But I think it's super cool, and, like, it definitely has its place.
Looking at it as a whole, guys, we didn't just all of a sudden have deathmatch wrestling. It started, you could go all the way back to like your Abdullahs and your Bruiser Brodies and these guys that were doing this real just brawling. I mean, Bruiser would come out with chains and drag people through the crowds with it and stuff. Like, they were doing some hardcore stuff in the 70s and 80s. This question kind of right here is kind of a loaded question. When you look at like an FMW with your, front hill martial arts with your funks and your Foleys, where do you guys say like the origins of deathmatch really started? From two guys that have done as much and seen as much as you guys have with this subgenre of pro wrestling. Like, where did the origins of what we're doing in 2023, when do you think that officially kind of started with the style of deathmatch wrestling we're at now?
I think it 1000% started in Japan and came from those areas, the Japans and the Puerto Ricos of the world that allowed for blood and guts. They celebrated blood and guts. And then you have guys like Ian who come over and expand off of ECW, who really kind of pushed in that hardcore and really started that without crossing that line, to then allow XPW to exist in those early days of, those wars. And I think that kind of, and Ian being the one that never went away, kind of allowed that genre to continue to grow and really take root over here, with guys like Pondo that had been to Japan and Necro and, guys that had seen it firsthand and then were able to push it forward. But, you have guys like Mick Foley who were using light tubes on WWE, just never got seen, that Boiler Room match. And, he got that because that had happened in Japan. And I think that's definitely where it came from. And we've just changed it up a little bit.
Like every other part of wrestling, it's just kind of evolved from where it started.
Yep.
They say hardcore wrestling started in Tupelo at the Tupelo concession stand brawl with Jerry Lawler and the Blonde Bombers and those guys, and then it evolved to where ECW was. Did they just take did ECW evolve from FMW, and then GCW or IWA Mid-South and all of that just kind of kept evolving off of each other's backs, I guess? Is that kind of like the general consensus here?
Yeah, I mean, to me it is. I look at it as Brody and Abdullah; those guys inspired Onita, and so you move on to that. And I think FMW is the true, because hardcore wrestling and then deathmatch wrestling kind of have a split in them. Like, hardcore matches, you're like, here's Raven coming out to the ring with a shopping cart and stuff like that. That's, to me, that's hardcore. Is it going to make a loud report? Am I going to get a good visual out of it? And then you have deathmatch wrestling. Who's getting thrown off scaffolding, through plate glass? Your classic CZW stuff. So I think there was a marriage, and then there was a split, but they're still friends. Like, they carried on. And I think now that split really did happen in that, like, 98 to, like, the end of ECW, beginning of of the original XPW. That was when that split from hardcore to death matches in the States really took place. Because they saw that, hey, ECW worked, but it didn't work, and now it's going on to television. We need something that's going to fill that line. And so somebody stepped up and they did it. And that's, it's that merging thing, but it all stems from the Japanese culture just absorbing everything and loving it.
FMW had a ton of mind-boggling stuff from, people like Hayabusa and everybody that went through there, the Funks and the Foleys. They had a Piranha death match. They had the original exploding barbed wire death matches. Are some of these, once again, you know what, I'm kind of trying to paint a picture here for the evolution of this conversation. Like, were these the early versions of, the syringe and the eggplant things? Because these guys were like, how can we outdo what the guys did last week? Fuck it, let's put a 50-gallon tank and try to submerge each other with a bunch of piranhas in there. Was this just the, the old syringe and the eggplant, but the 1986 version of it?
1,000%. I mean, you even had early, the early CZW days and the early IWA days where, you have the pencil boards that exist, and because they're like, well, let's see what we can do to top this. And it was like, where's our line? The Carnage Cups of the world, where it's like, okay, there's a line here, we don't know where it is, and we've got to find it somewhere. And it just took different promotions saying, hey, we're going to push the line this far, we're going to push it this far. Well, we don't feel comfortable going that far, we'll stop here. And seeing what companies were able to stay alive pushing that envelope, and what ones weren't.
And I think you're a vet of one of the best ones of those in the Tournament of Survival. At TOS, I think GCW did it the right way. It's palatable enough that if somebody was walking by, they'd be like, oh, what is that? And It's like, you kind of have to watch it as a car crash, but people who are fans of it love it. Mm-hmm. So it's that perfect melding to where it's just aggressive enough without being disgusting. And I think that's where the spot that we're talking about went. It went to that disgusting level. And not the disgusting, like, oh my God, that's so bad. Oh, but like, oh, look at that, his skin is hanging back. Or like Mick Foley's ear getting ripped off. There's digestible levels of disgusting. And this kind of slightly went beyond that. And it put a lot of things in a strange place for promoters. But media-wise, it did exactly what it is. It did exactly what they wanted it to do, and nobody's going to forget it.
Well, and I look at it as, the gauge that I always took it off of was, my former wrestling manager and best friend was a big 80s guy, who loved the Hogans, the Warriors, the very character-esque, and was like, man, deathmatch wrestling fucking sucks, dude. And then getting him into death matches and saying, hey, this is what it really is. And he's like, okay, that rules. Mm-hmm. Like this I love to watch. But then there's always lines for him where he'll kick it in and be like, okay, that's just too far. What they're doing that for what? Like, what's the point of this? And then there's other times where he's like, okay, that was an incredible match, but then at the same time, he'll watch a Slack match just because he knows it's a car crash. Yeah. He knows that that needs to exist because that keeps that, idea of our genre alive, that it is true chaos, and it's a spectacle to behold.
Well, not last night's show that we did, but the show before that was the Shane Mercer fire spot. And I was concerned that, okay, they lit a guy on fire inside of a building. So now next thing I know, I'm going to hear about VFW halls getting burned down all over the land because somebody wanted to repeat it. Yeah. And luckily it didn't happen, but he did that. And I'm like, if you only look at that spot, you go, okay, mud show. But if you look at the rest of the match, it's such a good hardcore match between Shane Mercer and JJ Escobar that it's so good. Like, I could put it on TV. That's how good it was, because it wasn't over the top. It wasn't that. But then the last match of the night was the Duke versus Schlack, and you know what kind of match that is. We already know what kind of. That's two chairs, light tube. That's what it is. It's just ridiculous. I was running roaming cam for that. I was picking fluorescent glass shards out of my beard for 2 days.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I'm in the shower after the show, and I'm slice my hand. I'm like, you know, shitting me right now, right? And but those are I don't want to call it acceptable, but that's what I expect to see when I go to a show like that. Know I'm going to see something unexpected, but if the unexpected is a stunt man, because he wasn't a wrestler, it was a stunt guy that got lit on fire. If that's what it is, cool. I'm fine with that. That's the level of unexpected I can live with.
Yeah, but I've also been on shows with this exact same stunt guy who lit himself on fire and ruined the entire night for everybody.
Right.
You know, that same guy who quote unquote knows what he's doing, who lights his crotch on fire, burns himself, goes to the hospital, and half the people in that crowd, all they're smelling the rest of the night is burnt flesh. And then we have to go on after that because he decided, oh, that'll be great. And, you know, ruins it for everybody else. So then you have, you know, those kind of things where it, you know, it's back to finding that line and finding what is acceptable. And I think, you know, when you have guys like that come in that are more loose with their bodies because it's like, well, that's what I do. I do stunts for a living. And we're like, well, we have to stay healthy because if our bodies don't work, we can't go make money the next weekend.
Right.
And so we have to take a little bit more calculated risks, you know, and it's the same way with dude that did the syringe spot. Like he works for one company and does one thing. Yeah. So if he gets hurt doing something absolutely ridiculous that none of us would ever do, he doesn't care because he'll just wait till the next show comes along and he'll be healed up by then. The rest of us have to, you know, lose bookings and stuff if we do these things and get hurt because we know they're stupid.
Right. No, it actually it plays onto that. So that match that the fire happened in didn't need that spot. That spot meant absolutely nothing to the match. Did not need to be there. That match would have been really fun regardless of that spot being there. I'm not going to be Meltzer and sit here and be like, it's 5 stars because I hate that. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care if it's 5 stars. Did the audience that paid to come see the show, did they enjoy it? That's what matters. That's what matters. It doesn't matter. I don't care 10, 15, 20 years down the road. These guys aren't in here putting on a wrestling clinic. They're in here to put on a show and make money for the night. And that, damn it, most of the time, that's what happens. Like last night, Mercer faced Remington Roar in an absolute great match, in my opinion. But it's, you know, it's week in and week out. It doesn't have to be the thing. There was no weird inset of somebody who didn't need to be there. Like, I get it as one of your friends, one of your lackeys, oh, here's a stunt guy. But there's got to be a little bit better judgment on the call of both the promoters and the guy setting the match up to, like, this is still your livelihood for some of these guys. Let it, you know, do it. There's guys that we have around here. Tommy Vendetta is not just a deathmatch wrestler. He's a damn good one. Yep. He's not just a deathmatch wrestler. He's a pretty good wrestler as well. And so I've noticed that he started to take bookings with a lot of non-deathmatch guys for death matches because he can get them through that, get them some exposure in a different world, and he can work a safer style without having to use a lot of the stuff. So it's cool. I just, like you said, you pay the price if you do something wrong, unless you're a guy that only works for one promotion and is guaranteed to show up and do dumb shit every time that promotion's on.
Orin, let me ask you a question. This is one of those things where you can choose to pull the curtain back as much as you want to here. A lot of the stuff you guys are going back and forth about and you're talking about are some of the spots, the light tubes, the crazy scaffold matches with you're going through the pillars of glass. All of the stuff you guys do. If you haven't and you're listening and you haven't listened to mine and Orin's chat when he came in, and I interviewed Orin, we kind of talk about this, but I'm going to ask you kind of a similar question here. When you guys are preparing for a match and you know you've got a spot that's going to be, you know, going through a big pillar of glass or multiple light tubes, how do you go about working that in? Because when you work a match, you know, you and Ethan have both, you said, you know, working it the right way, so to speak. How do you kind of help build your story in the ring while also staying true to the genre that's helped get you guys over with what y'all do every week?
I think one of the biggest, I think there's 2 examples that I have of my career that this worked out perfectly. It's the Tommy Vendetta and I match from No Holds Barred, where I do the set the chairs upside down, my classic spot, throw them through the painted glass, and you know that's where he kicks out at 1. But everything we do leading up to that is a it's a great wrestling match that just has glass and blood with it, and working the crowd and doing everything you would in a traditional match to then make that big spot at the end really, really mean everything. And it was the same thing with the destroyer out of the balcony, at No Holds Barred 6. That whole match leading up to it was just a slow progression. Other than starting the match the way we did, like, it was a slow progression to get to that final big crescendo. And the reason it's remembered forever is because everything we did to get it to that point. Because I think that if we just have a terrible match where all we're worried about is that one final spot, that final spot really doesn't matter, because people aren't hooked into it by the time we get to that spot. They're like, oh dude, remember when the guy came out and took the destroyer? Like, that was a thing that happened, because people have taken it from higher and people have already forgotten about it. But I take that in that moment, and everything we did leading up to it makes it that moment, and makes it that huge show that it is, because we made it a wrestling match first and added all the implements in afterwards. And I think too often guys are going out there and they're like, okay, so we're gonna do this because the crowd will lose their minds and think that this is nuts. And it's like, yeah, but we've done nothing up until that point to make them care. So I promise you, they're not going to care like you think they're gonna care. And I think that happens a lot, where it'll be clipped, it'll get shared for a day, and then people will never talk about it again. And in the back, guys are going, hey, this is gonna be nuts. Like, the crowd's gonna lose their minds. And then they don't. And now you've just taken that giant risk for nothing, because you didn't do your due diligence to get them to really buy into you and your story that you're creating in the ring, before you get to that point.
Ethan, kind of the same thing for you now. From your perspective as working on a broadcast team, whether you're holding a camera or looking through the kind of the producer's eyes of it, when you're shooting the match, how do you adapt when you're on the fly like that? If you're on a roaming cam and you're in a match and okay, these guys are going to do some kind of wild shit here, like, how do you adapt to that on the fly as somebody holding a camera? Because it's as random for you as it is for the guys in the ring a lot of times. I mean, if you've been to a match like this, guys listening, like, they kind of get it. It gets kind of wild. And the cameraman he's an innocent bystander a lot of times, and not in the same ways, but in a lot of ways as a ref. Wrong place, wrong time. You might end up just getting fucking hit with something. Yep. So Ethan, how do you approach it, man, as being somebody who's going to be there and having to know, okay, shit might get a little cuckoo, but I'm going to also be holding a really expensive piece of equipment and trying to put on the best show as I can here without, losing my mind or my head.
So I've got, and this is like super rudimentary, I'm not going to lie to you, but this is what I like to use the best. So I've got my setup here, right? Mm-hmm. And it's literally just a selfie stick on a tripod, but it gives me like a good grip. Now, the difference that I have in regards to some of these guys that come in and do broadcasting and videotaping and stuff like that, and it's not to toot my own horn, but like, I've done wrestling school. I just haven't, like, there's a long story behind that, but regardless of that, so now what I do as this, I go, okay, I'll go to the guys before the match and I'll say, hey, just treat me like what's the, I know here, and then I put a personal challenge in my head to predict where the spots are going to be to try to get the best visual possible. So I'm like, all right, if I was in this spot, where would we go next? And kind of like seeing where they're going. Now, I'm not going to pull back the curtain completely on this just because it's really fun to do that. But like when guys are when you see two guys, you kind of already have an idea of what they're going to do. And I said it earlier with like the Duke. One of his spots is chair, just hitting each other over the head with light bulbs. That's a consistent spot of his. So when you know that's going to happen, if you can get a really good side-by-side shot of that, there's a great video out there that I think Hardcam Frio has. It's Hoodfoot and the Duke from like 2 or 3 years ago, and they're just absolutely just I'm talking, they probably have 95 light bulbs apiece, and it's just shot for shot. And every time somebody will hit a shot, swig a beer, hit a shot, swig a beer. And it's beautifully shot. And so I put myself in the mindset of like, all right, I have to look at it like a filmmaker. Where am I going to get the best view from, not from only my perspective, but my perspective is going to be whoever's seeing it on the screen that they're watching it on. So I have to look at it not only from like a wrestling aspect and make sure that the crowd can see it and I'm not really blocking them. That's why I like to use the phone with the little stick, because then if I'm down on the floor, that's the only thing in their way, not a whole human body. But that's where I'm at on that one.
One of the things that's the most iconic about the deathmatch scene are the crowds. Orin, you and I started talking about some of this beforehand. It goes back to kind of that evolution of where it all started. We go back to that mid-90s push, Philadelphia, ECW, the 2300 Arena. Those fans became ravenous for what wrestling represented there. And as you guys kind of both mentioned the differences between hardcore wrestling and deathmatch wrestling as that evolution happened. But if you've watched GCW or your CZWs or your No Holds Barreds, you see a lot of those same bloodthirsty, ravenous fans for the deathmatch scene. It's very reminiscent of the 2300, and a lot of the guys I've talked to have said when they get in the 2300, you still feel that energy of what it was like back in the day with ECW. And so I guess this question now is, having both of you been in the building, been to the shows, lived the life, when you go to a deathmatch, is there a very definitive crowd that they have for the shows?
Oh yeah, and I like to think that deathmatch fans are a little bit better than your traditional wrestling fans. And that's not to knock traditional wrestling fans. I just think that they ride or die, and you see the community that comes with it. You see the true camaraderie that comes with it. We just lost one of, the absolute best fans there is in Piss Jug Mike. And, he was a guy that I traveled with, a couple times on the road, where him and another fan took, Dysfunction and I, because they were like, well, we're going anyway, so might as well just give you guys a ride, early in my career. And they will be there no matter what. They will support you no matter what. If you're doing a different endeavor or you're doing anything, they are behind you 100%. And these fans really become best friends. You see all the pictures that they take together, as fans, and they love to show up and represent and to really support these companies and these wrestlers. They're always wearing somebody's merch. And a traditional wrestling fan, you have to pull teeth half the time to get them to buy merch, no matter how good it looks. Because they're like, yeah, well, it's wrestling. I'm not going to do that. Like, a deathmatch fan is going to come up and be like, hey, man, how much is your shirt? You tell them it's $25. They'll give you $40 and say, yeah, we're good. Because I want you to have more money to enjoy your life more. I think they're just the best kind of fan. They're hard to please a lot of the time, but once you've pleased them, you are definitely somebody that they will defend and they will go out on a limb for in every possible way.
Ethan, what's it like in the Midwest for you guys?
Every single so we do a lot of I go to a lot of independent shows just in general, doing ring crew stuff like that. But there's a difference between your general independent wrestling fan and between your indie fan and your deathmatch fan. Like Orin said, they are ride or die. The front row at every single Horror Slam show has names on it. Those people have the same seats they had last time. Those people are when they come through the door. They are slapping hands with people. Wrestlers know them by their first name. It's not just, oh my goodness, hey, I haven't seen you since last time. It's like, yo, Bobby, what up? It's one of those deals. That's the crowd that you're marketing towards, and they go out of their way to make it. They're not only so there's times that you can be involved in the show at like a regular indie show. The crowd is part of the show. The crowd has been used at, like, deathmatch wrestling, the crowd gets used as weapons. Fans bring weapons as a huge thing in the deathmatch community, at least out here. So
we do it in
they're
Tennessee as well. Tons of guys are booking fans bring the weapons matches down here in the
absolutely
Nashville area.
absolutely
Yeah.
love it when it happens, because the most ridiculous shit comes through the door. We did a match, and it was Pondo versus Hardcore Hillbilly, and somebody brought a Sven from Frozen. It was like a lawn ornament or something, and they strapped light bulbs to it. But there's an energy that comes with it. It's a community. It's almost in this. I hope it's not a knock on them, because I know a lot of them are, though. Deathmatch wrestling fans are a lot like juggalos in regards to, it's a family. It's not just a community. It is a family, and they are. You'll see them yell at each other, and you think, wow, these guys really hate each other, and then they're sharing a beer after the show, and you thought these two guys were going to start fighting each other, but they're just far enough away that that's not going to happen, and that's when you realize, oh, hey, this guy really likes guy A in the ring, and this guy really likes guy B in the ring, and so they'll back them up, and that's their hype man for shot for shot.
Oh my God!
A lot of deathmatch stuff happens outside of the ring, not a lot of it takes place in the actual ring, so the crowd gets involved a lot more, and it helps too, in my opinion anyway. I think it helps the promoters to be like, yeah, we sold the front row seats to those guys because they know the etiquette that a fan should have at that show.
Yeah. And I think for me, I would not still be wrestling today if it wasn't for deathmatch wrestling and the fans that came along with it, because those fans, they make you want to do what you're about to do to your body. I would not do that for a traditional wrestling fan. I would wrestle, but I would not do that because I know that it wouldn't be appreciated to the same level. I know that, I wouldn't hear the words I hear from them afterwards. Like going to Milwaukee every single month, like I used to, that I lived for that, because you'd see, Bobby and Tiffany in the front row every time. You see Joe, you see, the older guy and his wife, and then you'd see a kid in the back row because his dad rules, but he took care of his kid the whole time and made sure this kid wasn't going to get hurt. Mm-hmm. But I knew that I could show up and put my body on the line for all these fans because they genuinely appreciated what I was doing, because they understood that I didn't need to do that. I did not need to mangle myself and, mutilate my body for however much money I was going to get that night. But they loved it every time, and they were loud every time, and they really, really care. Genuinely care about you, the human, and what you are giving them for their entertainment. It's like the best fanatical sports fan you could find. The guy that no matter what, like me with the Astros, I don't care how bad the Astros are, I'm going to love the Astros, because that's a team that is giving
World
me
Series and just
because they've given me those moments. They've given me the ride and the highs and lows that no matter what, I'm going to do that. And I think they're the same way, that they're lifers, and they truly love the people that are doing what they're doing in the ring for them, because they appreciate it, and they're not like, sorry, that 450 wasn't perfect. I could not be less impressed. They're like, oh my God, look at them. That's a bad cut. Like, they have hospital bills now after this.
Oh yeah.
And yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I was just, this is how much the fans mean to deathmatch wrestling. I wouldn't be broadcasting deathmatch wrestling if it wasn't for that collective of fans, and specifically Mike. And so, RIP to him. The reason we broadcast that first Horror Slam show that we did was because Mike had been to every single Horror Slam show that they had done. And the promoters approached us, and they said they saw us at another show, and they're like, hey, we had been talking about having one of them on for an interview. And they were like, hey, can you guys broadcast a show? And we're like, don't know if we can, but we can try it. Why? And they go, well, we have a fan that can't make the show, and we'd really like to do it. They're sick. They're unable to make it. They've made it to every show. And I said, you know what? We'll do our absolute best. I'm not going to charge anything for it. because it's a run. But then we come to find out that that's Mike, and we saw the outpouring that has happened at every single indie show that we've been to since his unfortunate passing, which has been like 4 or 5 of them, and it's just because not only was he a Deathmatch fan, but he's just a wrestling fan in general, and it's spread through every community. But I wouldn't be where I am right now without, and myself and PK, and I could speak for him on this, without fans like Piss Jug Mike, we wouldn't have a job doing this. So much as Warren stated, if the fans weren't this way, I wouldn't broadcast Deathmatch Wrestling. It's not a knock on the art itself. It's just the fans make it so much better than it already is.
Well, because they're not ashamed to be fans. They're not ashamed to go out there and scream their head off and lose their minds over the match. Like, I think a lot of traditional fans get to be where they're like, yeah, well, I'm kind of too cool to cheer. I'm kind of too cool to do a boo yay here. I'm not gonna do that. No. But Deathmatch, I don't give a shit. They're gonna scream and yell no matter what.
No, they paid their money. They're going to be there. They're
the
there
synchronized
for the
chants and the big yells and the pops and all the stuff that makes it unique. They're all going to continue to do that show after show. Even if they go to a 3-night stand and they're there a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, every night is like a new... I've used the analogy a lot before. It's like seeing a band like Metallica versus a band like the Grateful Dead. You see Metallica 3 times on one tour, you're probably going to see 98% of the same songs every night. It's going to be a fantastic show, but they're going to play their hits. You go to the Grateful Dead every night, and you see them 3. It's 3 different shows entirely every time you see them. And that's the way I view Deathmatch Wrestling. You could go to a 3-night stand on GCW, and every single night, Brett will have a different vibe for that show. And it's not the way it is, and it isn't how he books, but it's like... Those guys don't go out there. Yes, they have the hits where you'll see, the Duke spot or, the upside down leg up chairs. You'll see some of the spots that are famous to you guys, the pizza cutters that are famous to you guys. But when it boils down to it, like, that might be like one piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle though. Yep. And that's what I like about it is the uniqueness of every single match that you do, because there's so many unique ways to do what, like... I've seen some really cool shit with guys that have stacked glass, and then you're like, how did they fucking not just kill each other? And that's just from the outside looking in on it. One question about death matches that I felt like, Ethan, you and I talked about him a lot last night, but this conversation, when you talk about deathmatch, the genre as a whole, you have to bring up David Arquette. And it's so weird how this man has worked his way into wrestling in so many facets, because he started as being one of the most hated guys. He won the title. But here we are now, and he did it. What was the death match against Gage? Was that 2018?
Yeah, the 2018 or 2019, but it was the video. Oh, no, it had to be 2018 because the documentary got delayed a year.
When you guys saw that, from your perspective, I'll start with you on this one, Orin. What did you think when you saw not only somebody who wasn't from that deathmatch fraternity or however you want to see it, but he wasn't even really a well-respected wrestler to begin with, who climbed in the ring with Nick fucking Gage? Call a spade a spade.
I think he was somebody that took it seriously. And I think he got into wrestling and really gave it true effort and did right by wrestling. But once it came time to do what I do and do what deathmatch wrestlers do, he realized just how in over his head he was.
Like, oh no, yeah.
And because you agree to do this stuff because you're like, just the publicity alone. I know numerous people who bought that pay-per-view just because of the shock value of, oh my God, this is David Arquette versus Nick Gage. What are we about to see? This is insane. And then next thing you know, like his throat gets cut and he's losing his mind, and we have what happened, and I think it's really exciting, and it made for really fun times. But at the same time, I think it showed just how wild this genre really is.
Even a sense of credibility too. Like, and it's weird because if that happens to anybody else, any other person, any other worker, anything like that, it's not going to matter as much. It's like, oh wow, damn, really hope they can cover the hospital bill. But that happened to a celebrity, somebody who has a standing outside of the deathmatch market, and so you're like, okay, this shit's real. It's not something to mess with. Nick Gage is a bad mother. If you didn't know him, it's like, this dude's a bad motherfucker. Like, that's how that shook out. And I think it did a hell of a lot of damage. And like I said, I hate watching that scene in the movie because of the hospital trip scene that follows it, or in the doc. But it did so much to legitimize deathmatch wrestling again after probably 15 years of kind of just swimming in the doldrums. And between that and the XPW episode on Dark Side of the Ring, those two are probably the most moving pieces of media that put forth some kind of credibility towards deathmatch wrestling now, and why I think it has a better audience now than it did 5 years ago.
1000%. Yeah, and I think that it has to go through those giant outlets, right? It has to. Getting onto those platforms is the best thing for it, you know. But like I said, it's also the worst thing. It opens it up for a lot of bad. But that's the risk you take with anything like that. There's always bad with the good, no matter what you do. And I think these are some pretty clear examples of it.
Doesn't it almost feel a little Wild West-ish? Like, or like a little dirty, like not to the point of like you did something completely illegal, but like, hey, you know, I paid for 5 candy bars, but I got a 6th one and they didn't see it. Like, there's a little bit of that. Deathmatch
yes.
wrestling.
Well, and I took my buddy who's a nurse, and you know, he wrestled with me back in the day and had never, like, he knew I did death matches, but he had never been to one.
Right.
And we took him to the Mystery Vortex show.
Okay.
And he was like, oh my God, he's like, this can't be legal. Like, this, people can just do this and it's okay. And I was like, somehow, yeah, there was so many times I'd be driving back from Milwaukee and hadn't cleaned up yet, and you stop at a gas station, you're covered in blood still, and I'm just going about my business like a normal human being. I tried to clean up as best as I could, but you know, you see the gas station clerk who's looking at you like you've just murdered someone,
or just broke out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house.
Right.
And I'm just like, yeah, man, can I get this ice cream sandwich and this cup of coffee, because I still got a ways to drive. And they're like, are you okay? Should I call somebody? Like, I feel like that something has gone terribly wrong. You're like, oh no, I'm just a wrestler. And they're like, that explains nothing of what I'm seeing right now. Cool, you're a wrestler, but what happened to you? Yeah, it does feel illegal.
It's funny that, oh God, I lost my train of thought. It's funny that you say that though. So I'm walking, I'm helping clean up at the facility, and it was after the Hillbilly Pondo match. And Hillbilly's been standing at the merch booth for, I don't know, 2 hours, just profusely bleeding out of his head at this point. And he's in the bathroom, and I said, "Hey man, good match." And he's like, "Oh yeah, thanks." He goes, "Lost a lot of blood." He goes, "I hope I can make it home." And I'm like, "Oh God, no, man. Just hang out, have some orange juice, chill out for a little bit. Don't." I'm like, "Oh no." But it speaks to that level to where it's a different group of people. It's,
oh yeah,
you know, you put yourself through hell, and you're still so cordial and polite afterwards. It's insane to me.
Al,
I love it. It's great.
Al, what did you think? Because you just recently watched You Can't Kill David Arquette. When you saw him cross paths with Nick Gage, what was your initial reaction?
He gonna die. I was like, this is stupid, because Nick Gage isn't gonna hold back for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you've ever seen one Nick Gage match, you know. I've had refs on here. I've had Orin and I have talked about him. Like, he's infamous in this scene. I've had refs that have been like, he'll talk to you, and he just has that Nick Gage personality all the time. And they're like,
Yep.
whether he's like what you were just talking about at the convenience store, Orin. Like Nick could be standing there prim and proper, fresh out of the shower, looking like $1,000,000, or he could be standing there dripping in blood, head to toe, and it's the exact same
Yep.
guy. Either way, no matter what's happening.
1000%.
Gentlemen, this probably needs to be a part one. We could probably go for another hour and a half and keep going. I'm not going to keep you guys much up later than this. I feel like we've done quite a bit of damage tonight. Thank you. I heard an echo.
Sorry, my thing did the thing.
No, I think that was on our end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a fork in it here, and I'm going to go, okay, this is a good stopping point, because I think we're going to be able to circle back around at some point and have a much, you and I spent 45 minutes, Orin, when we did your interview, and we were like, we could go for another couple hours on it. Well, we just went for another couple hours, and we still have another couple hours worth of shit to talk about.
I have so many questions I want to ask.
So this is the fun part for me, though. I don't really have to say anything. Just plug your stuff. Tell everybody where to find you. What you've got coming up, Orin.
I return home to Milwaukee for the 420 Classic, which is hilarious for me, being I've been sober for 12 years. ICW Milwaukee is the only place that will ever get me to do a show like that. So it's probably already sold out or near sold out, but I'll be in Milwaukee on 420 and 421. Possibly doing something on 422, but that is yet to be confirmed. And then after that, we've got the Wrestle Rave Death Triad down in the greatest city in all of America, Houston, Texas, where I'm competing in the Death Triad, but I'm also more excited to go to the Astros day game the day after. I was able to work in the proper flights to make that happen. And then I'll have a bunch of stuff coming up kind of sporadically throughout, kind of all leading up to the Insane 8 here towards the later end of the year.
I feel like I need to see a Death Triad.
It's an interesting concept.
I have a list of death matches I want you to watch.
Okay.
That's it. The way when she first started getting into it, she didn't have a ton of wrestling background, so she was like, "Make me a list of matches." So I made her, the classic Will Gray, Southern Wrestling, NWA, Flair Steamboat, like Savage Steamboat, a lot of that stuff. And as she started, like when she saw TLC 2, she was like, I need more of this style of wrestling. She was like, I want to see, like that style. So and then she saw the Nick Gage, and she's like, yeah, let's watch this stuff. Let's go to a deathmatch show. Let's book a GCW show this summer. Ethan, plug your stuff, man. What's going on with you on the Forklift Podcast?
We're live every Thursday night at 9 on Twitch, YouTube. It's on a Forklift Wrestling Pod at 9 on UPN, I guess, after the Steve Harvey show. Fuck it. I don't know. It's an inside joke. You can find us there. Myself, currently, I'm participating in Indy Idol. It's Michigan Indy Idol. As I put myself on the road to get back into the ring, I'm doing a promo competition. Live judging for that is Monday. My good friend Cody over at Wrestling Rage, who also does a lot of broadcasting, he runs that show. And like I said, Thursday nights, you can find myself. I'm at Jensen Collins 3 on Twitter, which I need to figure out how to petition Musk to change that. And otherwise, it's wherever I'm at. TikTok, here, Twitter, doesn't matter. It'll pop up. If you message the On a Forklift stuff and you guys want to talk, it might be me, it might be PK that answers it. It's one of us two. Just request to talk to the other one. Who cares? Otherwise, you can find me on all of my regular stuff. It's Ethan on a Forklift or on a Forklift Wrestling Pod, as I've already said. Shows coming up April 22nd. We have Metro Pro Wrestling. We'll be broadcasting that live on YouTube. And then on May 19th, we'll be doing Horror Slam versus GCW 4. That will also be live on YouTube. So you can find us on both of those. I'm very excited for that. So,
Al?
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at justagirl918. coming up soonish, we're going to launch the Boss Bitch Power Hour on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern. We have Boss Bitch Trivia. Last week we did the, I think our best trivia, which funny enough, so how it works is we usually do like wrestling. So I do a round of wrestling trivia. There's always a round of Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? And then there's like the mystery round, which I pick just for funs. But last week we had the other show on the network on Dirty Belly, and we did chef questions. So that was really fun. They got really heated and argued about things.
We had 3 chefs on the screen, and even me being out of the game for the better part of 3 years, it was immediately like riding a bike. Like, it just, that flip switched, and I was like, oh, okay, I remember that. Like, so yeah, I was going to fight with them. I wasn't going to let them try to smooth talk their way to an easy win.
So, yeah. So that's all I got. That's it.
For me, my shout-outs, follow Wrestling with the Truth, 2 of my favorite Canadians up north. Follow Apron Bump, The Hardest Part of the Ring, that's pretty Kyle. SES Vince, Katie Wrestling 13, Dad Hat Wrestling, Mr. B-Roll, XLG DOG, Creation World, that's Travis Pointer, Matt Ritter, and Mara the Shark Watkins. But I really appreciate it, man. Like I said, Ethan, Orin, I definitely think, Orin, every time you and I get together, it's like 30 minutes isn't enough. 2 hours apparently wasn't enough.
Because I talk too much. I'm sorry.
I'm not even mad about it, man. Like it was like I said, it was supposed to be a super easy episode, and we ended up like literally going for 90 minutes. And I was like, holy shit! I told him it was only going to be an hour. So I genuinely appreciate it. Ethan, you and I will be crossing paths much more often, hopefully. It's been a blast spending the last 48 hours with you. Orin, as always, I'll be in your DMs at some point, probably to bug the shit out of you. But for the Boss Bitch, for Ethan on a Forklift, and for the Wizard King Orin Veidt, I am the Will Gray. But now, as we close another episode of Botched, Bots, and Share Shots, I want to take a minute and thank you for listening. Remind you to go wherever you do anything on the internet, like, follow, subscribe, unsubscribe, then subscribe again. Leave a comment telling me how great I am or how terrible I sound. Either way, it helps the algorithm. It helps find new listeners. If you're feeling really generous to be one of the VIP people, head over to patreon.com, donate to the Smacked Raw Podcast Network.
Smacked Raw?
Rivet City Radio Podcast Network. We don't work there anymore, ladies and gentlemen.
We don't work there anymore.
Different 3 letters now. Feeling really generous, donate to Rivet City Radio on patreon.com. You get some fantastic swag. We get some fantastic guests. It's a win-win for Orin Veidt, for Ethan on a Forklift, and for the Boss Bitch. I am the Will Gray. Thanks for stopping by and listening, my people.